Chapter 12 of The Training of Wild Animals. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Natalie Doctor. The Training of Wild Animals by Charles Bostock. The Animal Trainer. Some Famous Trainers. To secure the right man for the training of wild animals is about the most serious problem that the proprietor of an animal exhibition has to solve. Very often, the problem remains unsolved. An animal trainer is a complex and unique person in more ways than one. He is not always superlatively endowed with the characteristics that are attributed to him by most casual observers. Curiously enough, the very element that would seem the most essential is scarcely ever reckoned as his chief virtue. Courage is considered by those who know little about it as one of the first requisites, but a man may have physical and moral courage to an unusual degree and still be quite unfit for a trainer. The animal trainer may have, and all do have to some extent, the physical courage which is admired, but it is an unconscious courage, and plays such a minor part in a successful performance that the possession of it is not noted, either by the trainer himself or by those who know him. There are faculties far higher and far more difficult of cultivation, as well as more rarely possessed, which the animal trainer must have. First of all are good personal habits. The finest lion trainers are men of the most absolute personal integrity, who smoke and drink very little, if at all, and who possess self-control to an unusual degree. It is a fact very little known, and somewhat difficult to realize by those who have not studied the matter, that in some curious, incomprehensible way, wild animals know instinctively whether men are addicted to bad habits. It is one of the many problems which are beyond the human understanding. For those who are the least bit inclined to drink or live a loose life, the wild animal has neither fear nor respect. He despises them with all the contempt of his animal nature, and recognizes neither their authority nor superiority. Just as men recognize superior minds and strong personalities in other men, so does the wild animal recognize such qualities. And it is wonderful how extremely susceptible animals are to graceful, refined, and pleasing personalities. The personality of an animal trainer is one that counts both with the animals and with the audience, and the more magnetic, polished, and accomplished he is, the greater will be his success and the stronger will be his influence, both with the animals with which he comes in contact and with the public which observes him. But if a man has begun to take just a little, or has deviated somewhat from the straight road, the animals will discover it long before his fellow men. From that moment, the trainer's life is in danger every time he enters the cage, and the animals keep a keen lookout for the moment when he will either trip a little, always the signal for animals to spring, lose his nerve, or let his thoughts go wandering off to other matters, even for a moment or two. The least carelessness, the least indifference, even a little unusual movement on his part is quite enough to make the animal spring upon him and get him down. Occasionally, a trainer who is beginning to take to drink or other bad habits realizes that he will soon lose the respect and control of his animals, and is wise enough to drop the training business before too late. But as a rule, once a man has taken up this profession, he is extremely loath to resign, although he may be perfectly well aware that he endangers his life every moment he trusts himself among the animals. There is a peculiar fascination about the life which keeps him at it, and although I have often warned men, they have rarely been induced to give it up until some severe accident has happened, which has either disabled them or given them such a shock that they lose their nerve entirely. One of the finest lion trainers that America ever had has, now voluntarily retired, though still in the prime of his life. But he is addicted to drink, realized the danger, and so was sensible enough to give it up before too late. He felt it was absolutely unsafe for him to enter the arena night after night, when no matter how little he drank, had a numbing effect upon him. The climax came one night when, feeling a little more numb than usual, he suddenly noticed in the midst of the performance that his lions were all looking at him curiously. Instantly he knew that they had lost their respect for him, for all trainers can tell, before anything happens, when the moment has come in which they are likely to lose their dominance, if that loss comes, not through accident, but through the paralysis of their own power. He realized at once the pitiful state he was drifting into, and the danger, and was wise and quick enough to get out before they got him. But that was the last time he ever entered the cage. From being tractable and docile, the lions from that time had nothing but hatred and contempt for him, and his approach even near their cages was always the signal for savage snarls and vicious leaps at the bars. Another essential in animal training is patience. It must be an ingrained attribute of the character, and dominant at all times, a constant, persistent, unwearying patience. Without it, the trainer will never make a complete success. Allied with patience must be good judgment, and one who is patient generally has good judgment. This is one of the reasons that, as a rule, Englishmen and Germans, being more phlegmatic, make excellent animal trainers. Trainers whose patience is limited never last long. There comes a day when, through hasty temper or a sudden loss of patience, the trainer says or does some foolish thing which he always has reason to regret, and bitterly too. In one case, one of the animals would not respond to his cue, in spite of being spoken to several times. The trainer kept his patience for some time, but the fact that the audience was getting restless made him nervous, and in a foolish moment he shouted at the lion. The shout was so unusual and so unexpected that every lion in the cage started, and the next moment there was a scene of the wildest confusion. The animals roared, jumped from their pedestals, and soon pinned the man to the floor. By a supreme effort he raised himself, and being near the door, the attendants were able to keep the lions back by firing blank cartridges until he could get out. But he was terribly mauled, and it was a long and tedious illness which followed. To show what a disturbing effect that shout had on the lions, it was hours before they could be quieted, and even when they were fed, 2 hours afterward, they were still restless and excited, and left their meat every few minutes to roar and growl. That was the last time the trainer ever entered the cage. He lost his nerve completely. Unless a man has absolute self-control, he can never be sure of what may happen to him as a lion trainer. This trainer's sudden loss of patience proved that he was unable to control his feelings, in itself a weakness, and animals recognize all weaknesses immediately. Among other things, physical agility is a prime requisite. It is better if it is the agility of reserve rather than the agility of aggression, for aggression arouses a like quality in the animal, and develops an appreciation of his brute strength, which sooner or later may be used against the trainer. But the equipoise and power, existing only in those of good personal habits and judgment, give an animal trainer the needed ability to escape an otherwise unavoidable danger. Another quality is nerve, and plenty of it. Without nerve, no man can do anything with a wild animal. It is the secret of the animal trainer's success, while ceaseless vigilance means the safety of his life. A man may be nervous, and yet have plenty of nerve. I have known trainers who would start at the slightest noise or a sudden sound, and who would rather walk 10 miles out of their way than meet a stranger, or attract attention in any way, and yet in times of danger, when their lives hung in the balance, would exhibit the utmost nerve and daring, mixed with a calm assurance that was astonishing. These personal qualities are more or less apparent to all close observers of animal training, but there is one which is even more essential than any of the others, and for which the trainer seldom gets credit. Yet it is one which places his profession on a par with that of the school teacher, the preacher, the writer, or any of the students of men, because the study is more difficult and more complex. This is a knowledge of animal nature, as diversified and peculiar, and as subject to varying conditions and environment as human nature. Some may say that it is not as complex as human nature because it is not as highly organized, but it furnishes the same food for thought, with the added element that upon the trainer's knowledge of the idiosyncrasies of his charges depends his success, and very often his life. Constant vigilance, not only in the arena, but out of it, is the trainer's watchword. Consequently, trainers are a hard-working lot, for it is not only the actual public performances which take up their time, it is necessary to have constant rehearsals, constant lessons to the animals about various things, for it is never wise to try to correct or teach much during a performance, and there is always much to learn and study. Many animals drop off in time, either by sickness or from some other causes, and new animals have to be trained to take their place. This is always done privately, and few ever realize the amount of time and trouble that an animal will sometimes require before he is perfected in one little act. The ideal animal trainer is a man of superb physique. His eyes are clear, his muscles hard and sinewy, his limbs well grown, his body well developed, and his clean, healthy skin shows the warm blood circulating beneath. He is without blemish physically, and his mental capabilities are good. He knows men as well as animals. He makes a versatile application of that knowledge. He knows the traits, the history, and the tendencies of those animals which form his life study, and on the constant use of that knowledge depends his dominance. I have always been particularly fortunate in my trainers. From the time when I assumed control of the business in 1881, it has been my good fortune to have intelligent men who take an interest in and love their profession, and who love their animals and charges. Edward Dyerling, chief animal trainer at the Chicago Exposition in 1893, received his tuition under me in England in the 80s. His persistency in practice was remarkable, and while his methods with his animals gained their entire confidence in him, the unearthly hours which he devoted to their education would have told on the vitality of many men of stronger constitution than his. The success he attained was more than well deserved. He was a humane trainer, and possessed those good qualities so essential for success in the art of animal subjugation. He was not killed, as is generally believed, but died a natural death several years ago. The wild animal performances of 1893 were small affairs compared with the exhibitions of today, but his performance with 5 male lions gave the World's Fair visitors much to talk about, and secured for him a great reputation in this country, and I am naturally proud that he began his career in one of my establishments. But I am prouder still of a lion trainer who is with me now, Captain Jack Bonavita, who has trained no less than 27 grown lions to perform in the arena at the same time. That this has been the work of years is hardly necessary to state, but the patience, courage, judgment, and terrible nerve strain necessary to reach this climax no one can ever realize except those who have watched him carefully week after week, month after month, and year after year. There were times when it seemed as though he would certainly have to abandon his task. There was so much to contend with, so many difficulties to face and overcome, and such bitter disappointments. But Bonavita is a man of iron will, and when once he has made up his mind to do a thing, he never rests until he has accomplished it thoroughly. When he first made his appearance at the Pan American Exhibition in 1901, His entrance with the 27 lions was so impressive that for a few seconds after the first flare of the band, the silence was intense. Few will ever forget that incident. The gates at the back of the arena opened, and slowly and majestically out walked 27 kings of the forest, and at the unspoken order of one man, for he never speaks to them when performing, each one took his special place on a certain pedestal, and went through all the various evolutions and acts in which he had been so carefully trained. The sight of this one man moving quietly about among all the lions made a deep impression upon many people. President Roosevelt remarked, after witnessing his performance, that he had never seen or heard of anything like it, and that he admired the man's pluck, for he was a hero. General Miles wrote from the War Office and said, "I was particularly impressed with Bonavita and his monster grouping of 27 lions. Such control of these noble creatures as was shown is truly remarkable. The first impression one gets of Captain Bonavita is that of a refined and courteous gentleman. He is peculiarly reserved, and it is with the greatest reluctance that he can ever be induced to talk about himself. But he is never tired of talking about his lions. He is of an extremely sensitive, highly strung nature, and although many feel that his nerves must be of steel, there are times when the terrible strain is more than usually severe, and he retires to his own quarters completely played out. For it is absurd to think that a man who does such a risky thing as he does is never nervous. He realizes his danger as much as anyone, and he has had cause to do so many times. His chief comforts seem to be his cat and dog. The dog, a magnificent Great Dane named Pluto, is devoted to his master, and after a specially trying time, when he seems quite unable to speak to anyone else, the master talks to him. The cat, named Tramp, has no pedigree whatever, and is as commonplace-looking an animal as can be found in any backyard. But Captain Bonavita is almost as devoted to him as to the dog, and when the cat sits on the dog's back, the man who can control 27 lions is perfectly satisfied. I have spoken of some of his accidents in other chapters. In all, Captain Bonavita has had over 50 bad ones. But these have not prevented his going among the lions again at the very first opportunity. To use his own words, a man does not refuse to go into battle because he has been hurt. Another trainer who has become famous through her daring and wonderful control of the most treacherous of wild beasts is Madame Louise Morelli. She is a Frenchwoman and talks to her jaguars, leopards, and panthers in French, which they appear to understand quite as well as any other language, as it is not so much what is said as the tone of voice in which the words are spoken. Madame Morelli is a small woman and rather frail, but her nerve and quiet self-possession are truly wonderful. Leopards, panthers, and jaguars are noted for their stealthy, sly ways, and their deceit and treachery. They are most difficult to train and subdue, and can never be relied upon. These cringing big cats are the most alert fiends by nature. They have none of the nobility of the lion, none of the aloofness of the tiger. They are cowardly and sly, and are always watching an opportunity to spring on the trainer's back on the slightest provocation, so that the training of them is more perilous than work with any other animals. And yet this small woman goes into the arena with 5 of them, makes them go through various acts and maneuvers, and finally sits down among them and allows 1 or 2 of them to lick her hands, and even to take them in their treacherous mouths. This is dangerous enough, but the most dangerous trick of all is when she allows one of her jaguars, Cartouche, to place the weight of his prostrate body on a stick held horizontally in her hands and over her face, while she looks up into his glaring eyes. Herman Whedon is noted for his mixed groups, of which I have already spoken. He has unlimited courage and daring, and is a splendid trainer, but runs a terrible risk in dealing with Goldie, who is one of the fiercest and most dangerous tigresses. Time after time he has been terribly torn and lacerated by this animal, and time after time he has been warned to give up all attempts at training her and leave her out of the group altogether. But one might as well ask a mountain to move as to ask Whedon to give up Goldie. In spite of her treachery and vindictiveness, he is truly fond of her. He will take the trouble to explain over and over again that it is only occasionally that she has these wicked fits, that often she is most gentle and affectionate, and that she has such a beautiful head and body that it would completely spoil his group to leave her out. And although all he has ever been able to make her do is sit on a pedestal and ladder and allow him to open her mouth, he persists in trying, with wonderful and unlimited patience, to subdue that terrible, passionate nature of hers, and induce her to be a little more tractable. He is afraid of nothing, and trouble and opposition only make him more determined to overcome obstacles and attain his object. A wonderful proof of training is the man-ape, or chimpanzee, Consul. This animal eats and drinks like a human being, plays the piano, uses a typewriter, and behaves in such a wonderfully human way that one begins to wonder whether Darwin's theory is not right after all. Charles Day is one of the oldest trainers in the exhibition, and has been in the Bostock family for 30 years. The fascination of this life is well shown in his case. At one time he was also a trainer of lions, but now contents himself with showing visitors round and explaining the various zoological specimens. He has had more unique experiences than any man I know, and tells them in a very dramatic and amusing manner. End of chapter 12.